Hey, what's good everybody? So today on this 808 mukbang, we're actually going to be cooking steak. I'm not going to be eating a whole lot of steak, but I'm going to be eating some of it with a light salad, and it's going to be kind of like a rice bowl type of thing, a donburi. But instead of having it as a lot of people do, like tataki, which is basically where they sear off the beef, get it to basically rare, the rarest it can be without being raw. That's basically what I'm going for. But it's going to be with a dish that is similar to the Spain's version of BISTEK, which is basically they sear the beef and then put a tapenade of fried onions with a dark rich bordelaise sauce, which is basically using pan drippings, red wine, beef stock, and it's a beef stock reduction basically. But with BISTEK in Philippines it's more of an adobo, it's more of a stew, it's more of a braise where you take these lean cuts of beef and cook it to fuck, basically. Not to say it's not delicious, it's fucking delicious. It's one of the dishes that, as a Filipino American, which I also identify because I'm basically Burmese, Filipino, Chinese, Mongolian, and Spanish, I identify also as a Filipino American. So if you grew up as a Filipino American, chances are you've had BISTEK. And the BISTEK that my mom always cooked was always rubbery. Even though the steak was rubbery, it was really delicious because as it was cooking, it was also absorbing the soy sauce. My mom put oyster sauce in it, sauteed rings of onion to give you that nice sweet contrast to that salt and all of that. And it's going to be topped with a light light salad with a balsamic vinaigrette that you can get at any store. Simply because the richness of the beef that I'm going to be cooking, on top of the juices that are going to be soaking into the rice, plus the fattiness that's going to be coming from that, as well as the creamy texture of the sauce from the BISTEK, and that's the way that I cook, because I like the texture of the sauce to be very creamy and very velvety. So it's going to be very overpowering on the palate and on your tongue. So just to have that nice texture of crunch, a thin shaving of lettuce salad, romaine lettuce salad right on top, should do the trick. So hopefully you guys like what you see, and it's so easy to replicate. Filipino cooking at its heart is easy to replicate. I hope you guys like it. Let's get into the video. Right now we're actually going to be cooking the steaks now. So what I done day before was I got these steaks that I bought the day before yesterday. I believe it was on a Thursday that I got these steaks. This is actually a skirt steak or hanger steak. One of the easiest steaks to cook, at the same time one of the most difficult steaks to cook, for two reasons. One, because there's barely any fat. Like, you see chunks of fat all over the place, but it's very rare that you have a steak that's not as badly marbled as this piece, but it's one of those steaks where it doesn't have a lot of fat, is what I'm trying to get at. So because it doesn't have a lot of fat, you don't need to cook it very long in the pan. To get it to medium rare, maybe medium, for a steak about this size, it's probably about a pound, maybe less, just over a pound of meat. You're talking at least 5 to 6 minutes on each, 5 to 6 minutes for medium rare on both sides. So roughly 3.5 minutes on both sides. The problem with cooking skirt steak, especially with bulk butchers and wholesale butchers such as Sam's Club, is that they're uneven cut. Say hi, you know, that's my cousin in the background. So basically, if you look, it's basically an oblong shape. And the reason why it's an oblong shape is because it comes from the ribs of the cow, and it's a muscle that's used a lot. Like when you butcher the steak, you'll see it, and when you butcher the side of beef, you'll see it, and it's one of those cuts where it's flavorful, really good in carnitas, which is one of the cuts that I personally recommend using. Now, if you notice, it's not as dry, but there's a gloss on camera. And I have a camera in front of me here, so we're gonna go to this one right now. As you can see, it's very dry. There's a gloss on it on both sides. And the reason why I dried it is because I put it in the freezer. Now, when you put things in the freezer, especially when it comes to whole protein such as such as beef and pork, you want to make sure that the beef is thoroughly thawed out. And the reason why I say it's thoroughly thawed out is because when you cook beef and it's frozen, meaning it's soft on the outside, when you literally press into the meat, which I'm actually going to do on camera, when you literally press into the meat and there's no give to it, that means it's still frozen in the center, which will leave you a very raw piece of meat and a very rough tasting piece, meaning the texture is very rough, it's very coarse, and it's stone cold in the middle. So to avoid that, take it out of the refrigerator about 10 to 15 minutes before you cook it. I just took it out about 5 minutes ago, so I'm going to give it another, maybe to get it to really room temperature, about another 5 minutes, and we're gonna start cooking. So to cook the steaks, you want a hot pan. I have the pan set on low. Now the reason why I have it set on low is it does two things. One, it creates a heated environment. Two, it keeps the pan hot and it gets the pan nice and hot slowly. So when you crank the heat up, it's only probably, I would say, a good 30 seconds from getting super ripping hot. And that's what you want to cook your steak on, is a ripping hot pan with a lot of fat or oils. And the fat medium that I'm choosing is, and I know it's sacrilege to use another animal protein of fat, but I like to use pig fat, bacon fat. Not too much, but just enough, probably a tablespoon of bacon fat to probably 3 tablespoons of any type of olive oil. It doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to be really good quality olive oil. It just has to be oil to put in the pan so that way the pan doesn't stick. I am using a non-stick pan, or I don't think this is non-stick, but I think it's non-stick. I'm using a pan that's non-stick. The best steaks that you can get also is from a cast iron skillet. The reason why I will 1000 recommend a cast iron skillet is because you get a beautiful crust, what's called, and it's a crust form called the Maillard reaction. What the Maillard reaction is, there's proteins in the steak that have sugars, and those sugars, when made in contact with the heat of the stove, creates a beautiful crust with the seasoning. And since we're talking about seasoning, generally with a steak like this, you want to use salt, pepper, a little bit of herbs such as rosemary, thyme, and some garlic. But because I don't have that, and because you're cooking on a budget, I'm assuming if you're watching for this video, then you can make a regular, basically 1:1. So if basically you're making, this seasoning is enough for both of these steaks, but if it's not enough, I'll just add a little bit of salt and pepper here and there. But in the seasoning blend, it's a simple blend of garlic powder, onion powder, thyme, rosemary, salt, and pepper. That's all it is. Blend it together. It's a 1:1 ratio. I'm gonna add a little bit more pepper because when you get that nice sear in the pan, it creates a level of smoke. Here's my cousin being a troll. I'm not editing that out, you know. But and with that being said, it's a beautiful flavor to have when you're cooking. So, and it also adds a level of heat. So while the steaks are coming up to room temperature, we're also going to talk about the sides and the topping that's going to go on this BISTEK rice bowl. So I have basically a heart of a romaine lettuce. I'm not going to use the outside, I'm just going to use the heart. It's the most tender. Hey, you don't need to sneak in, just walk in. This is your house too. This is vlog style, even though I'm trying to up my production game. So we're just going to be using the heart because it's the most tender. It adds a level of sweetness. If you really pay attention to what you're eating, you can actually taste nuances or different types of flavors within your food. So it has a nice sweetness and it gives another layer of texture to this. It's going to be cut into fine ribbons. And then if you don't want to make your own dressing, go to the store, spend about $6-7 for a good dressing. This one I got at Safeway. They sell this at Safeway. It's the Olive Garden Italian dressing. And just for a little bit more flavor, we're going to add a little bit of lemon after we sear off the steaks. To make the BISTEK, from what I learned and the way that my mom does it, I hope a lot of your nanas at home do it too. Onion, finely sliced, or my mom, she makes a fine slice out of it. It's one of those things where you caramelize it beautifully. A little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. But the difference, what I'm going to do and what my mom does is she takes the meat out from the pan, clean the pan, cooks the onion, and let it caramelize slowly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use the residual juices or the fond from the steak, the drippings in the pan, to make a nice sauce with the BISTEK using this and dark soy sauce. Dr. Putti is not your average soy sauce. It's actually a dark soy sauce. The difference between dark soy sauce and light soy sauce is when you cook it, there's a level of what Japanese call umami, a secondary level of flavor that enhances the dish. But I'm not going to use a lot of it. I'm probably going to use a capsful or probably less than a teaspoon, because the amount of salt we're going to be packing onto the steak is a lot. There's going to be a beautiful crust that forms, that Maillard reaction from the moisture of the steak to everything else. It's going to be beautiful. And then at the same time, we're going to have this plain baha or white rice. Basically, you don't need to have fresh rice for this dish. It's a dish that you can do a meal prep for. If you're doing this for meal prep, I would suggest you cook the steak to rare. Put it in your food prep container, and then when you microwave it, at least 3.5 minutes with a little bit of chicken stock. The reason why I say a little bit of chicken stock is when you freeze or you refrigerate your foods, the flavor does not mature. It actually goes away, especially when you're putting it after it's rested. It's still hot. The steam washes away the flavor. So because it washes away the flavor, you need a little bit of that seasoning back. But since we're going to be using that, I like to make my donburi. We're going to start with this part first with norikomi furikake. I use normally, it's basically a rice seasoning. On this one, it doesn't have much salt, so you want to be quite generous with it. So have it here, and then I'm going to show you guys here. So you want to be quite generous with the furikake, because when it mixes with the steak juices, with the BISTEK sauce and all of that, it's beautiful. It's a nice texture. You got that roasted, toasted sesame seeds with the dried nori or the dried kelp, and it's another flavor that I can't really describe. So steaks are still coming up to room temperature. Catch you guys later when we cook the steak and prepare the BISTEK. Alright, so steaks have been resting for about, I would say, a good 5-10 minutes after I took it out of the oven. And what I'm actually going to do is I actually want to make it into what they call, in Japanese cooking, it's called tataki. Now tataki basically means you're searing the thing hot as hell on the outside and leaving the inside or the center of the steak pretty raw. Now looking at my pan and looking at one of the bigger steaks, I realized that it's not going to fit. And on top of that, because it's such an awkward shape, meaning if you look at the steak as a whole, this side is thinner than the center. So this part will cook faster, these edge parts will cook faster than the center because of how thick it is. So what you want to do in this case, and I know it's bastardizing the steak, but it's one of the things that you should do, is trim the corners. Now, why you want to trim the corners? One, it will improve cooking time. Two, it'll make the steak look a lot better when you're ready to present it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to trim, I would say about an inch, maybe less than an inch off. And you want to use a sharp knife. And you don't need a, by the way, when people buy knives, people think that, oh, the fanciest knives will work. But actually, no. You don't really need a fancy knife to do it. And I'm actually going to go over that in the next part of the clip, in the next clip. But you might think I'm going to be throwing these away. No, I'm not going to throw these away, because these are excellent to eat as well. You're still going to cook it the same way. And in fact, I'm actually going to get out another pan and get that warming up. I'm going to put this towel on my belt loop. And you're actually going to get that warming up too. So that way, when you're ready to cook the steak, those steaks, it'll cook in the same amount of heat as the stuff. And in fact, I'm actually going to use the smaller pan, start these off first, so that way I can get the BISTEK going. So, excuse me while I wash off this dish. The number one thing a lot of people do when they make a mistake is they don't, when they cook their ingredients, they use the same board over and over. If you have what they call a sani pad, meaning it has rice wine vinegar, a white vinegar, distilled vinegar, and alcohol, you can wipe your blade so that way it disinfects the cooking surface. But because we don't add it, so now that I've washed my dish, I just want to talk about a couple of things when it comes to cooking appliances. First and foremost, your knife. I got this knife last year at Long's Drug CVS Pharmacy. Now, this brand is called the Pure Komachi 2. I don't know why they call it the Pure Komachi 2, but the reason why I like it is these knives are one of the best ways to get into knives in regards to cooking. It has a nice handle, fits the hand really well, and it's comfortable to use. Another thing that I want to touch upon is how to sharpen a knife. Now, I'm not a professional knife sharpener, so I don't want to say use a stone. If you can't afford a stone, which I recommend you should learn how to sharpen on YouTube, you can get this one. Now, this is a dual edge sharpener. This part is the fine side, this part is the coarse side. The coarse side is what you want to start off on. So what you're going to do is take the sharp side and then go down in an even, steady motion. Likewise with the fine side. So before I do that, I'm going to go do at least 2 to 3 passes. I like to do 5 because I like a razor sharp edge, especially when you're cutting onions. The reason why you want a sharp edge to cut onions is because you don't want to cry. You don't want to have those onion juices flying all over the place and making a mess of your eyes. So that's basically it. And then you have what's called a steel. Now, a steel is basically something to make your edge a little bit even. So the way you're going to take your steel is you're going to hold it like you're holding a tennis racket, and then find an angle that's about like that. You can do it like that or like that, and then just from the butt of the blade or the back of the blade to the tip, and then you can basically do this several times, so that way your edge not only remains uniform, or the edge geometry of the blade or the sharpness of the blade remains uniform, but it also keeps your knife sharp every time you use it. So this still can get a little bit warmer, get more to room temperature, but let's talk about the onion now. So here's our onion. This is a beautiful onion, a regular onion that you can get at any grocery store. And instead of cutting it into a dice, you want slices. So what you're going to do is you're going to peel the onion by cutting it first in half, taking off the root, taking off the top, or what they say top entailing the onion. And since this is a very small onion, you don't need to worry about it being very chunky. If it's a fatter onion, a little bit larger than this, you may want to cut it a little bit thinner, but this one you want to cut fairly thick. I'm used to thin cuts, and since we're using a smaller pan in the background, I'm probably going to cut it thin. So again, with this side, this other half, top, our tail and top, your onion, peel it. And a lot of people, they keep this second layer. I take it off. I don't know why, I just do. And if there's a little bit of pieces on the cutting board, it's okay. These pieces are perfectly fine to use. They're not garbage. They're just as delicious. And then you want to cut against the grain. So the onion has lines that go across. So what you want to do is you want to just cut against that. When you cut, make sure you have your knuckles balled up, so that way you don't cut yourself. And as Gordon Ramsay would say, let the knife do the work. So if your knife is sharp, it should pass really easy without having you to saw through it and spread all the juices. So you don't need to be very fancy with it. You don't need to be technical with it. Just slice the onion. And what I like to do after I slice the onion is I like to let it sweat out. And what sweating out for your vegetables is, it's extracting the flavor. So using some of the seasoning, we have that onion powder going through it. Just gonna mix it up, and then we're gonna get a container for this. So hold on. So a container, and actually let me get a container for the sauce as well. So we got a container for our sauce, we got our container for our onions. So put these onions in. And as as you notice, like I even though it's not uniform, the thing for me is I want the onion flavor in the BISTEK. The onion flavor adds a level of sweetness, and at the same time, it adds a depth of flavor that I can't really describe. I consider it umami. So, cleaned up our knife. Let's set this aside. Put away my phone. And then just to prep the lemon, take your lemon, put it on the cutting board, palm, even light firm pressure, light to moderate pressure on the lemon. You get a juicy lemon that way. Cut in half. Done. That's it. That's all she wrote. And we're gonna squeeze that over the steaks as they finish. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna cut a few bulbs of garlic, and then I'm just gonna take like a few bulbs of garlic to leave whole. So basically, in total, 6 bulbs of garlic. These ones I'm actually gonna peel and slice fine as I can, or chop or rough chop. And one way that you can do it is you can take a vegetable peeler or a veggie knife or paring knife and peel it, or you can just simply, easiest way, whack it. And in theory, if you don't whack it too hard, which I think I obliterated this garlic bulb, it should come out in one peel. So let's see, this one hasn't been whacked. Whack lightly, comes out. That simple, people. Not fucking rocket science. Alright? And then because it's already cut, you don't need to do the fancy brunoise or basically the fancy cut technique. You can just easily run your knife through. Simple as that. And it's going to be basically a part of the sauce anyways, imparting a nice garlic flavor throughout the sauce, making it somewhat of a true adobo. And that's pretty much all she wrote. That's it. And I'm gonna get a premium for this. So add this. And there's the onions there. Garlic. Okay. Now, for my favorite part, the steaks. The steaks are gonna go in, are still cold. I want them to be room temperature. They're still cold to the touch, but they're more malleable now. They're reaching room temperature. And one way you can tell your steaks coming out from the stuff is when they're cold, they're stiff as a board. And since you've air dried them in the refrigerator, they're glossy. And one way you can tell they're not as glossy is if the color on the top starts to change. The fat is now, you can spread the fat. You can play with the fat a little bit, meaning it's starting to melt in your hands. And basically that's about it. So, and keep in mind when seasoning, when we get to the next clip for seasoning, since we did dust this with a light Himalayan sea salt to keep the moisture in, get it dried faster, it's gonna be a little bit more salty. So err on the side of caution when applying when you're applying your steak seasoning. Simply because you want to taste the meat, but you don't want to overpower it with salt. That's the mistake that I made many times before, and it's a mistake that kind of ruined a cheap cut and ruined several expensive cuts. So yeah, turn this off. Turn this off. So now that we have our steaks now to complete room temperature, what we're going to be doing is we're going to take our seasoning, again simple seasoning, to 1 to 1 tablespoon ratio of garlic powder, onion powder, thyme, rosemary, and salt, pepper. I'm just going to add a touch more pepper to this seasoning because I want a little bit of smokiness coming from the peppers when it roasts. Not too much, just a touch. That's about a tablespoon. That's about a tablespoon, won't you say? Yeah. And then just use your fingers. Nothing, again, nothing fancy. Something easy, something simple. And now we're going to crank the heat on these suckers. pro tip, especially if this is your first time cooking, guys, especially guys who want to impress their girls, it's not about the flash and flare of a restaurant cooking. Most kitchens, when you set your pan on fire, something bad will happen. If you don't know how to control it, don't do it. There's a setting on your oven, I'm gonna angle it now towards the oven, towards my range, that you just need to turn this vent fan on. It'll go. I have a fan, another fan going because one, I sweat very easily. I have some body heat, so I sweat very easy. And now we're gonna start the cooking process. First, let's get these pans super, super hot. That's how you get that crust, that's how you get that fond, that's how you get that deliciousness. In this pan, I'm actually gonna just deglaze with about a mug's full, maybe a cup and a half of water. Let me get that ready now. So, any coffee mug, I got this generic small coffee mug. Very simple. And another thing a lot of people do is they baste their steaks. So instead of basting mine with butter, I'm going to baste it in bacon fat. Again, sacrilege, I know, but for me, I find it really delicious. So, putting it over the heat. I can tell these are almost up to temp. I'm going to turn off the fan first. I'm going to be sweating like a pig. Watch out. So turn this off. The reason why I turned off my comfort fan is because I want to make sure that I'm searing these steaks at a very, very high temperature. Getting the oil nice and glossy so that way the moment that the steaks hit, boom, crust immediately. So in order to get that crust, how are we going to get it? Aside from just putting the meat in straight into the pan, letting it cook, we're going to season it. Simple seasoning. Move these out of the way. And again, account for the fact that you probably dusted this with Himalayan sea salt just like I did. So be liberal, but not as liberal with the seasoning. You still want it to coat the steak evenly and beautifully. And the reason why I'm seasoning it from up top is one, you can see where you're going and no surface of the meat will ever be untouched. Okay? So I'm pretty happy with that. I know we're going to be adding a little bit more salt by way of the Datukuti soy sauce, so I'm not tripping at all. I'm not tripping at all. Nice from the top, up high. And if you're trying to salt bait, keep in mind, is an accomplished butcher and chef, so he knows what the fuck he's doing. So I may be a good cook, but I'm not salt bait or any other cook, so I'm not even going to attempt it. And what he's actually using is a finishing salt. So as you can, I'm going to actually go cut from this camera to the other camera. Both pans now are smoking. I'm going to actually turn this to medium low because that's getting way too hot. This one I'm going to keep because it has a larger surface area. And yeah, so we're going to keep this on the high, turn it to medium, and we're going to proceed by adding our bacon fat. So that's about a tablespoon. Add a little bit more. And you just want the pan, roll it around the pan. So you see how it's smoking already? That means your pan is way too hot. And let it sit for a little bit too long. Get your other steaks. Season, season, season. Season, season, season. Boom. Okay. Now, what I just did there was to test the oil is hot. Immediately when I threw the seasoning in there, it sparked. So, we're going to add a touch more oil. Just a touch on this one. And I gotta let this one, my other camera shut down, so we're going to be doing it from on camera 2 from now on. Alright, so, and I'm kind of sketchy because the pans themselves are about, I would say, about a good 2 feet away from the camera. So you're going to get some really, really good footage. So on this pan, when you're laying your steaks in, always lay away. So you pendejos who just throw it in there and you get burnt, you deserve it. So just lay it away, increase the heat just a touch. So this one, in this pan, we're going to actually cook it one steak at a time. Reason why is I didn't get a big enough pan to sear it. And you see me touch the pan and poke the meat. That's because I want it even cooked. So don't be afraid to touch the meat. Your fingers are actually being blocked by the oil, so long as you don't go too far into the meat. So let that cook. And the method that a lot of people say is let it sit. But what I like to do is to make an even cook is flip it every minute, maybe 30 seconds. So we have our tongs. Check that out. Not really good. I want to turn up the heat just a touch more. Not really good. Not really satisfied. Oh, this one's good. This is because I had the pan rested. So I'm going to leave it there for about a minute, maybe 2 minutes, just to get a nice caramelization and crust. This one has a nice crust. See, look at that. Look at that crust. I don't know if you guys can see that, but that's some beautiful crust. Now I'm going to do the same. Check on this one. Beautiful. Beautiful. What I'm doing now is I'm rearranging the steaks towards the center, the edge of the pan, so that way the heat from the outside of the pan cooks the steak. Since this is a flat bottom pan, I'm just going to tilt it, get some of the fat on all sides to cook the steak. And I'm going to leave this on this side for 2 minutes. And normally a steak about this size will normally take anywhere from, like I said, from 5 minutes. For me, I consider that medium rare. And then I'm going to change out this pan for a new one. At the same time, imbuing itself with that juicy flavor, because what I'm going to do with this fat is I'm going to take it out, douse it in this pan, so that way we increase the temperature of the oil, and this side, this top of the steak, or whatever side is facing up, will get cooked. So turn this over. That's alright. So now, let's turn it one more. Beautiful crust, and I'm going to actually take this out now. This is ready to come out. This is ready to come out. Beautiful. And then now, as I said, what I was going to do is I'm going to take the oil from this pan, dump it in here, and there's a beautiful gristle stuff on the bottom. So I'm going to turn on the heat just a touch, add a little bit of water. Alright, let me get my my whisk. Get my water, add a little bit of the water. I don't want to add a little too much, but just enough. Just a touch. Okay. Just a touch. Bring it up. Deglaze, and this will be your base for your sauce. So this right here is liquid gold. Do not throw this away. Just set it aside. It has all of the nice flavors and aromas. Let the pan dry out just a little bit. Crank up the heat. And then I forgot my spoon because I gotta base this sucker now. Now it's been about 5 minutes. Beautiful. Now don't be afraid to get in close with your pan. Alright? So now the pan, all it has now is the grease. Grease evaporates slower than loose liquid because of the viscosity. Add your onions. Add your onions that have been already sweated. Give it a little mix. And I'm going to add a touch more fat because I do not want the onions to char. I want a nice velvety sauce to it. So I'm going to add a touch of baking fat. There's the flame. Blow that out. Take it off. Okay. Got the onions cooked. We'll turn that now to medium heat. And then we're going to season. Always season your food. Season it lightly. Now we're going to do this one. Check this action. Oh, that's beautiful. Boom! Right there. And I'm gonna repeat that for the other steak. I'm gonna give that steak another 2 minutes, and then we're gonna add the sauce, and I'll see you guys at plating. So for this mukbang, I chose to do something a little bit different. I showed you guys how to cook a steak. Top it off with a nice crunchy topping or dressing, and I have a camera here that'll show it, and I'll show this camera too. But what I have is a steak tataki. It's very reminiscent of a BISTEK, with underneath is a reduction of the pan drippings and onions, sauteed onions and garlic with a little bit of dark soy sauce. On the top we have a salad, simply dressed with Italian dressing that you can get from any store, Parmesan, black pepper, and that's pretty much it. My drinks that I have are orange crush soda, and yeah, with that being said, let's get in. So, you want the steak? Yeah. The steak's in the oven, by the way. So, here we go. So, steak tataki generally is something that's eaten very rare. So, here's the first bite. Rather, let me show you the plate. So, underneath all of this meat and the salad topping is rice. Let me see if I can uncover it. So here we have the rice. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's there. The rice is there. And what I did was I also added from the resting pan that I had my steak resting in. I made another vinaigrette out of the dressing, just simple, using the fat from the steaks with a half a lemon, juiced it. It should, in theory, give a bright flavor that cuts through the richness of the beef. And I drizzled it on top. So, here are the first 2 bites. Oh yeah. Steak. The steak's in the oven. There's one in the microwave oven for you. It should be already well done. Since I know you and Gary cannot have it, there's 2 chunks of steak cut already. It's in the microwave oven. Then warm it again. Hopefully the background music that my mom is playing is not going to get this demonetized. But in essence, when you cook a steak, cook it to your liking. They say that turning it often ruins the flavor and runs out the juice. In fact, it doesn't run out the juice. The only reason why juices run out so quick is because idiots choose to cut it right after it's out of the pan. You need to let it rest, and while it's resting, they'll cook a little bit more. Oh man, I got shit on the back of my tooth. But generally, this is one of my favorite meals. I was introduced to steak by my dad and my mom. And my mom, being the frugal one of the 2 parents, she's very economically sound when it comes to finding deals and maximizing ingredients. So this dish is actually an homage to my mom, because we actually haven't had really good cooked beef until, actually, I think it was one of my mom's friends who invited her to a party, and it was a steak party. And I remember her and dad bringing home some food from the steak party, and it tasted different, and I actually liked the way that it was cooked. So excuse me while I turn this top camera off. Okay. Going back to that story, the reason why I like steaks rare to mid-rare, rare to medium is because you can taste the meat. It's not as chewy as you would think. And from then on, I started looking up ways on how to cook a steak really good, from oven, what the reverse sear method, meaning you put it in the oven at probably 250 for 45 minutes, to such and such and such, and all of that. But I'm actually going to eat this now. That hopefully this will actually conclude the video for 808 Mukbang. I'm sorry it's not me sitting in front of the camera eating food, but I thought I'd do a different perspective for the people who eat and who cook. Not many people really do breakdowns on what they do, and a lot of people, from what I understand, want to learn how to cook and want to be better cooks. And that's what I did. I learned by watching other people, more specifically first my mom and my dad cook, and then from there I had a culinary arts teacher in high school, basically home ec, and from there I just started working with a lot of friends who knew a lot of chefs, who taught me how the techniques that I know today. On top of that, it's also fun to idolize, even though I'm a Christian and it's bad to say, but it's fun to idolize and admire, more appropriately speaking, the techniques that these professional chefs have, chefs who have notoriety, such as Gordon Ramsay, Marco Pierre White, Jose Andres, all of them. Local chefs like Roy Choi, local chefs like Chef Roy Yamaguchi, LA-based Chef Roy Choi, Alan Wong, all of them. And it's one of those things where sometimes you just need to watch people and look at how they cook. But that concludes this YouTube video. I hope you like it. It's gonna be